Hi, I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond. I'm a literacy specialist, and in this video, I'm going to share a strategy that is so helpful in getting kids to learn to blend words to read them. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure to do that now, and then also hit the little bell so that you're notified every time I post a brand new video about teaching literacy in K2. Okay, so blending in the context of phonics and learning to read can actually have two different meanings. Number one, blending can just be putting sounds together and there's no reading or letters involved. So for example, if you say at, then your students have to say hat. That is blending, that's putting sounds together. Now, there's also blending in terms of being able to read a word. So after they've sounded a word out, or being able to blend means to put those sounds together and say run. Or in a more complicated word too, to be able to take these sounds, sp or out, sprouts, and put them together, that's blending too. So blending can have two different meanings. And in this particular video, we're going to focus on getting kids to blend to be able to read words. Blending is a skill that comes really easily for some kids, and for other kids, it's trickier. So if you've ever worked with a student or students who have had a little bit of trouble learning to blend, let me know in one of the comments. Okay, so the strategy that I want to share with you that is really great for teaching kids to blend is using a tool called blending lines. Now, you can absolutely create your own, but I will include the link to my blending lines on a ton of different K2 phonics skills in the caption for this video. So if you don't want to bother with making yours, you can totally go to the caption and grab it there. But now I'm going to show you what a blending line is and how you can use it with your students. All right, so first let's kind of put this into context and talk about when we would use a blending line. I like to think of blending lines, well, two ways. Number one, I view them as a bridge between you introducing a new phonics skill and then kids being able to read a whole decodable text with that skill. Now, getting them to read a whole decodable text is very important, but at the same time, a lot of kids aren't necessarily ready to go from like learning about AR to reading a whole decodable text with AR. They need a little practice in between. So blending lines can really serve as a tool to gradually release responsibility, because as you can see, there's individual words and then there's usually at least one sentence. And then here's a more advanced blending line. That one was short A CVC words, and then this one is for AR. So it's got some longer words, multisyllabic words, and then sentences. So they're really good as like that intermediate gradual release tool between you introducing a skill and teaching it and them reading a whole decodable text with it. But another reason why blending lines are so valuable is that they help kids build fluency with word reading. Now, for many kids, they will read a word a couple of times and then they don't have to sound it out anymore. They just get to the point where they can read it instantly. But especially for struggling readers, they need a lot more repetition, and this is where blending lines can be really helpful. So blending lines will expose them to, a number of different words on the skill that they are learning, plus any review skills, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then, my blending lines are set up so they actually read the whole page at least 4 times. And so every time they read it, they color in a star. It doesn't have to be all in one sitting, but having them use it in this way helps build fluency, and it makes it more likely that they'll get to the point where they can read whole words as opposed to having to sound them out and blend. So blending lines are a really good tool for building fluency. And I guess I said 2 ways that I use blending lines, but a third way, and again, this can all be done with the same sheet. It's a really good way to have kids review. So, like this, as I said, was AR, and there's actually some short A words, and I'll talk about why in a moment. So kids are not only, and like some ING words, so kids are not only practicing the exact skill that you've been working on, but they're also reviewing past skills that they've been taught, which is so important for retention and learning. All right, so you can probably tell how much I love blending lines and how valuable they are. Now let's talk about like, what is this, right? So you've been seeing these rows of words, and I'll try to hold this up the best that I can, but again, you can go to the caption to actually see the product and look at a preview too. That might be helpful. So this is short A, right? And on the first line here, because they read left to right, this says bag and then tag. The only difference between bag and tag is the first letter, okay? So they're kind of like, that's like familiarizing them with those chunks. And ideally, if they read b-ag, bag, then they might recognize that ag and say ag, tag. Now they don't have to. It's fine to read sound by sound. It's a good thing to read sound by sound. But this is, again, building their fluency with different patterns. So only one thing changes. And it's also getting them to pay attention to the small changes in words between, like here we have pan and man. The first letter is changing. But then it's not just the first letter that will change. So like in this line, ham is becoming had. So the last letter is changing. This is so important because especially when kids are first learning to read, they will like guess at words, but this is, nope, it's a tiny change. You got to pay attention to that very tiny change. Here we've got rat and wrap, right? Hopefully I'm reading these correctly. I'm kind of reading them through the back of the page. But again, it's a last letter changing. The T becomes a P. And then after those kind of like one letter changes, then we have a mixed row. So it's just fan, cab, jam, and pad. So here, totally mixed up. There's no like minimal pair change. And then at the end, of course, we have a full sentence because like I said, these are a great bridge between kids reading individual words and them getting to read a whole decodable text. So that's one example. Now, I want to show you what you can do to differentiate because for some of your kids, they might be like, oh yeah, this is like pretty easy. And so this is actually a more advanced version. That's why it says D1. The kids don't know, but you know the way these are labeled. And this says D2. And so this actually has more words. And this, you know, you can give some of your kids this sheet and others of your kids this sheet. And of course, you have to talk about like what is fair is not always equal. And everybody needs, you know, their own work sometimes and all that good stuff. But same deal, it's just more words. And the sentence here is a little longer. So instead of Jan had a map in the bag, it's Jan had a map in the tan bag. So you're upping the ante a little bit. So some of your kids can do this one, some of your kids can do this one. So that was like a short A example, but this is not just for kids that are first learning to read. Here is this AR example that has some complicated stuff going on. So here we're starting with what kids already know, short vowels. And let's say we've just taught AR, we want them to see the difference between the short vowels that they already know and then like AR words. So cat and then cart. Again, it's just a small change by adding the R. Ban and then barn. You just add the R. So they're seeing the difference. Pet, and then this one is tricky because it's a 2-syllable word, it becomes carpet. Okay, then here again we're switching. Car becomes far, beginning letter changes. Park becomes spark, so we're adding an S to that beginning blend. Start and then smart. So again, they're noticing the small differences between words. It becomes, you know, like multisyllabic words, ing endings, ed endings. These are all things that they would have been taught already. Blending lines are not to like test or get the kids reading types of phonics patterns that they don't know yet. This is to focus on a new pattern, in this case AR, and then also review other patterns that you've already taught. And then the last two here are sentences. And as you can see, they're a little longer, more challenging than like the short A. So these are blending lines. Okay, so link for these is in the caption. As you can tell, they're very carefully constructed. It's not just random words here and there. And when kids are first learning to blend, a lot of the words start with continuous sounds like s, n, so that the kids, it's just easier for them to blend when they have words with continuous sounds. So lots of detail and thought put into these. Link for these in the caption. CVC words, blends, digraphs, glute sounds, vowel teams, diphthongs, etc., etc. Lots of K2 skills. So I hope this video was helpful, and I hope that you try out some blending lines with your students. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.